February 14th, 1943, Valentine's Day. While couples across America exchanged gifts and promises, Major General Lloyd Fredendall sat 70 miles behind the front lines in a concrete bunker he had spent weeks perfecting. The bunker was his masterpiece, tunneled deep into solid rock, reinforced with steel beams, equipped with multiple escape routes and communication lines to Washington. Outside, the sounds of German artillery grew closer. Rommel's Afrika Corps was tearing through American positions at Kasserine Pass like tissue paper. American boys who had never seen combat were dying by the hundreds, abandoned by commanders who had never bothered to visit their positions. Fredendall adjusted his pristine uniform and reached for the telephone to call his corps commanders, not to coordinate a defense, not to rally his troops, but to blame them for the disaster unfolding under his command. "This is all Eisenhower's fault," he muttered to his aide, "giving me inferior equipment and untrained men." The aide said nothing. Everyone in the bunker knew the truth. Their general had never once visited the front lines. He had never seen the positions he ordered his men to defend. He had never met most of the officers he commanded. In 3 days, the American II Corps would suffer its most humiliating defeat of the entire war. Rommel would capture 2,500 American prisoners, destroy 200 tanks, and send the U.S. Army reeling backward 50 miles across the Tunisian desert. And through it all, Lloyd Fredendall would remain in his bunker, 70 miles from the fighting, directing a battle he couldn't see against an enemy he didn't understand. This is the story of the worst American general of World War II. A man who turned the Second Corps into a laughingstock, handed Rommel his greatest victory, and proved that cowardice at the top kills soldiers at the bottom. The tragedy began 6 months earlier, when America needed a general and got a bureaucrat instead. August 1942. Operation Torch was taking shape in the war rooms of Washington and London. The Allies would invade North Africa, establish a second front, and begin the long march toward Berlin. It would be America's first major offensive operation of the war. General George Marshall faced a critical decision. Who would command the American II Corps in this historic invasion? The Corps would include 40,000 American soldiers, many seeing combat for the first time. They needed a leader who understood modern warfare, who could inspire confidence, who could stand toe-to-toe with Rommel's veterans. Marshall chose Lloyd Fredendall. On paper, Fredendall looked perfect. 57 years old, 33 years of military service, a graduate of the Army War College. He had commanded training divisions, staff positions, and garrison assignments across the peacetime army. His efficiency reports praised his administrative skills and attention to detail. What the reports didn't mention was that Fredendall had never commanded troops in combat. He had never faced enemy fire. He had never made life-or-death decisions under pressure. His entire career had been spent in the comfortable world of peacetime soldiering, where the enemy existed only on maps and the casualties were theoretical. Marshall was gambling America's reputation on a man whose greatest qualification was that he looked the part. Fredendall certainly looked like a general, tall, imposing, with a commanding voice and an impressive uniform always pressed to perfection. He spoke in the clipped, authoritative tones that Washington expected from its commanders. He projected confidence even when he had no idea what he was talking about. But beneath the polished exterior was a man consumed by his own inadequacies. Fredendall knew he was out of his depth. He knew he lacked the combat experience of his peers. Instead of learning from more experienced officers, he decided to hide from the problem. If he couldn't be a great general, he would at least survive to be an old one. November 8, 1942. Operation Torch began with stunning success. Allied forces landed at Casablanca, Oran, and Algiers with minimal resistance. The French colonial forces offered token opposition before switching sides. Within days, American troops controlled Morocco and most of Algeria. Fredendall's Second Corps had performed adequately during the landings, but landing against token resistance was hardly a test of combat leadership. The real challenge would come when they met Rommel's Afrika Corps in battle. As the Allies pushed eastward into Tunisia, Fredendall began revealing his true character. While his division commanders scouted enemy positions and prepared for combat, Fredendall remained far behind the lines, obsessing over administrative details and bunker construction. He became fixated on creating the perfect command post, not a functional headquarters that could coordinate operations, but a fortress that could protect him from the dangers of war. He diverted hundreds of combat engineers from preparing defenses to digging his personal bunker complex. The bunker grew into an elaborate underground palace, multiple chambers connected by tunnels, reinforced with tons of concrete and steel, equipped with generators, communication equipment, and multiple escape routes. It was located 70 miles behind the front lines, farther from the fighting than some supply depots. When subordinate commanders requested meetings to discuss tactics and positions, Fredendall refused. "Send me written reports," he ordered. "I'm too busy with strategic planning to waste time on details." The strategic planning consisted of moving pins around maps without ever visiting the terrain those pins represented. December 1942. The first warning signs appeared when Fredendall's corps made contact with German forces in the Tunisian mountains. American patrols reported professional, well-equipped enemy units that fought with a skill and coordination that shocked green American troops. Division commanders requested permission to conduct reconnaissance in force to probe enemy positions and capabilities. Fredendall denied the requests. "We know where the enemy is," he declared from his bunker. "They're exactly where the maps show them." The maps were wrong. The intelligence was outdated. The enemy positions had changed dramatically since the original reports, but Fredendall refused to acknowledge information that didn't match his preconceptions. Major General Orlando Ward, commanding the 1st Armored Division, grew increasingly frustrated with his corps commander's refusal to visit the front or approve aggressive reconnaissance. In a letter to his wife, Ward wrote, "Fredendall knows nothing about armor and even less about the Germans. He sits in his cave and issues orders for battles he's never seen." Ward's tanks were scattered across a 100-mile front in penny packets, unable to mass for effective action. When Ward requested permission to concentrate his armor for a coordinated attack, Fredendall refused. "Concentration is dangerous," he explained. "Spread them out so the Germans can't hit them all at once." It was exactly backward. Rommel's greatest skill was defeating dispersed enemies with concentrated attacks. Fredendall was setting up his own forces for destruction. January 30th, 1943. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel arrived in Tunisia with the veteran Afrika Corps, bloodied but unbroken after their long retreat from Egypt. Rommel immediately recognized the opportunity facing him. Green American troops, poorly positioned and badly led, scattered across terrain that favored the defender. Rommel spent days personally reconnoitering American positions, studying their dispositions, identifying weaknesses. He crawled through wadis and climbed hills to observe enemy movements. He interviewed captured American soldiers to understand their morale and training. 70 miles away, Fredendall studied the same positions from maps in his bunker, convinced he understood the situation better than commanders who could actually see the enemy. Rommel's reconnaissance revealed catastrophic American weaknesses: isolated outposts with no mutual support, artillery positions with no infantry protection, tank units scattered in small groups across impossible terrain, supply lines stretched thin and poorly defended. Most critically, Rommel recognized that American leadership was absent from the front lines. German patrols reported no signs of senior American commanders visiting forward positions. Radio intercepts suggested that orders were coming from distant headquarters, with no understanding of local conditions. Rommel began planning an offensive that would exploit every American weakness simultaneously. February 14, 1943. Rommel launched his attack at Kasserine Pass with 22,000 German and Italian troops, supported by veteran tank crews and experienced artillery units. The Afrika Corps moved like a precision instrument, concentrating overwhelming force against dispersed American positions. Fredendall learned of the attack from radio reports in his bunker. His first reaction was not to coordinate a defense or rush reinforcements to threatened positions. His first concern was whether the German advance might threaten his command post. "How far are they from here?" he demanded, studying maps that showed his bunker's location relative to the fighting. His operations officer assured him that the bunker was safe, 70 miles from the nearest German unit. Fredendall relaxed and turned his attention to finding someone to blame for the unfolding disaster. At the front, American troops fought with desperate courage against overwhelming odds. The 26th Infantry Regiment held isolated positions until their ammunition ran out, then fought with bayonets and rifle butts. Tank crews abandoned burning Shermans and continued fighting as infantry. But courage couldn't overcome catastrophic leadership failures. Units received contradictory orders from headquarters that had no understanding of battlefield conditions. Reinforcements were sent to wrong locations based on outdated maps. Artillery support was impossible to coordinate because forward observers couldn't reach commanders who might have been 70 miles away. Colonel Alexander Stark, commanding a combat team at Kasserine Pass, radioed desperately for support. Enemy tanks approaching from 3 directions request immediate artillery support and air cover. The response from Fredendall's bunker: "Stand fast. Reinforcements are being considered," while American soldiers died under German tank treads. February 15, 1943. The second day of Kasserine brought complete collapse. German panzers broke through American lines and began their trademark exploitation, racing deep into the American rear to sow confusion and panic. Fredendall's bunker became a madhouse of conflicting orders and recriminations. The general blamed everyone except himself: Eisenhower for giving him inadequate forces, the British for failing to coordinate attacks, his division commanders for incompetence, even his own troops for cowardice. What he didn't do was leave his bunker to personally direct the defense. Major General Ernest Harmon, commanding the 2nd Armored Division, received orders to counterattack German spearheads. When Harmon requested a meeting with Fredendall to coordinate the operation, he was told the Corps commander was too busy with strategic considerations. Harmon drove to Fredendall's bunker and found the general studying intelligence reports that were 12 hours out of date. "General," Harmon said, "I need to understand the tactical situation before I commit my division." Fredendall waved at the maps covering his bunker walls. "It's all there," he said. "The Germans are attacking here, here, and here. Stop them." "Sir, these positions changed hours ago," Harmon replied. "I need current intelligence and coordination with adjacent units." Fredendall's response revealed everything wrong with his leadership. "I don't have time for tactical details. You're an experienced commander. Figure it out." Harmon left the bunker convinced that the II Corps was being led by a man who had no understanding of modern warfare. February 16, 1943. The third day brought the nadir of American arms in World War II. German tanks roamed freely through the American rear, capturing supply convoys, overrunning headquarters, and spreading panic among troops who had never imagined such rapid, coordinated enemy movement. Rommel himself led reconnaissance elements, personally selecting objectives for his panzers. The Desert Fox was everywhere on the battlefield, encouraging his troops, adapting to changing conditions, seizing opportunities as they developed. Fredendall remained in his bunker, increasingly disconnected from a battle he had never understood. The contrast couldn't have been starker. One general leading from the front, inspiring his troops through personal example, another hiding from the consequences of his own failures, protected by 70 miles and tons of concrete from the reality of warfare. American units began surrendering in groups, not because they lacked courage, but because they lacked leadership. Orders from Corps headquarters bore no relation to battlefield conditions. Supporting fires never materialized. Promised reinforcements arrived in wrong locations, too late to influence the fighting. Staff Sergeant Bill Murphy, 1st Armored Division, later described the chaos. We kept getting orders to move here, attack there, defend this position, but nobody seemed to know where the Germans actually were. Our own commanders were somewhere far away, sending us orders based on guesswork. By evening, American forces had been pushed back 50 miles. Rommel had achieved everything he hoped for and more. A complete tactical victory that restored German confidence and shattered American morale. February 17th, 1943. The final day of Kasserine saw Rommel consolidate his gains while Fredendall struggled to understand what had happened to his corps. German forces had captured the pass, taken 2,500 American prisoners, destroyed or captured 200 tanks, and inflicted over 6,000 casualties. More damaging than the material losses was the psychological impact. The myth of American industrial superiority had been shattered by professional German forces led by competent commanders. Word of the defeat spread throughout the Allied forces, raising questions about American military competence. In his bunker, Fredendall composed reports that blamed everyone except himself. He criticized the fighting quality of American troops, the adequacy of American equipment, the coordination of Allied strategy. He never mentioned his own absence from the battlefield or his failure to understand the tactical situation. General Eisenhower, commanding Allied forces in North Africa, began receiving disturbing reports from multiple sources. British officers questioned American leadership competence. American division commanders requested permission to communicate directly with higher headquarters, bypassing the corps level entirely. Most damaging were reports from war correspondents who had witnessed the battle firsthand. Ernie Pyle wrote, "Our boys fought as bravely as any soldiers in the world, but they were led by commanders who seemed to have no understanding of the enemy they faced or the ground they fought on." Eisenhower realized he faced a crisis of confidence that threatened the entire North African campaign. February 20th, 1943. 3 days after Kasserine, Eisenhower made a decision that would reshape American command structure for the rest of the war. He flew to Fredendall's headquarters for a personal assessment of the situation. What he found horrified him. While American soldiers recovered from the worst defeat in the Corps' history, their commanding general was obsessing over improvements to his bunker complex. Engineers were installing additional communication equipment and expanding the underground chambers, while wounded soldiers lay in aid stations without adequate medical supplies. Eisenhower's aide, Captain Harry Butcher, later wrote, "The general was more concerned with the comfort and security of his headquarters than the welfare of his troops. It was the most shocking display of misplaced priorities I witnessed in the entire war." During their meeting, Fredendall showed no understanding of what had gone wrong at Kasserine. He blamed defeat on equipment failures, inadequate intelligence, and the fighting quality of American troops. He proposed solving the problem by digging his headquarters even deeper and moving it even further from the front lines. Eisenhower realized he was looking at a man who had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of military leadership. Fredendall saw command as an administrative function to be performed in safety and comfort. He had no conception of leadership as inspiration, example, and personal responsibility for subordinates' welfare. That evening, Eisenhower made the decision that would save the Second Corps. Lloyd Fredendall had to go. March 6, 1943. Eisenhower relieved Fredendall of command and replaced him with Major General George S. Patton, Jr. The contrast could not have been more dramatic. Where Fredendall had hidden from his troops, Patton made himself visible to every soldier in the Corps. Where Fredendall had avoided the front lines, Patton appeared wherever fighting was heaviest. Patton's first act was to abandon Fredendall's elaborate bunker complex and establish a forward headquarters within sight of the front lines. His second act was to visit every division, every regiment, every battalion in the Corps. He wanted to see the terrain, meet the commanders, and understand the tactical situation firsthand. The transformation was immediate. Soldiers who had felt abandoned by their leadership suddenly saw their new commanding general everywhere, in the front lines, at supply points, wherever American troops were working and fighting. Patton understood what Fredendall never grasped, that modern warfare requires leaders who share the risks and hardships of their subordinates. Soldiers will follow commanders they trust, but they cannot trust leaders who hide from the dangers they face daily. Under Patton's leadership, the Second Corps began its redemption. At El Guitar, American forces met Rommel's Afrika Corps again and fought them to a standstill. At Maknessie, American armor finally achieved the coordination and mass that Fredendall's scattered deployments had made impossible. The same soldiers who had been defeated at Kasserine proved they could fight and win when properly led. The problem had never been American courage or American equipment. The problem had been American leadership. Lloyd Fredendall returned to the United States, where he was quietly reassigned to training duties and never again commanded troops in combat. He spent the rest of the war preparing other men for battles he had proven himself incapable of fighting. His relief sent a clear message throughout the American Army. Competence mattered more than seniority. Battlefield performance mattered more than peacetime credentials, and leaders who failed their troops would be replaced regardless of their political connections. The lessons of Kasserine Pass echoed throughout American military doctrine for the rest of the war. Never again would American forces be led by commanders who refused to understand the battlefield. Never again would American soldiers be abandoned by leaders who prioritized their own safety over mission accomplishment. Fredendall's failure had cost 6,000 American casualties and handed Rommel his greatest victory in North Africa. But his relief established the principle that would help win the war. American soldiers deserved commanders who shared their dangers and understood their sacrifices. In the end, Lloyd Fredendall's greatest contribution to Allied victory was proving what kind of leader America could not afford. His bunker became a symbol of everything wrong with peacetime military thinking, the belief that war could be directed from safety, that maps were more reliable than personal observation, that administrative competence could substitute for combat leadership. Rommel later wrote in his memoirs, "The American soldier fought bravely at Kasserine, but his commanders fought from too far away. In war, a general's place is where he can see the enemy and his own troops. A leader who hides from battle will always be defeated by a leader who shares its dangers." The Desert Fox had unknowingly written Lloyd Fredendall's epitaph, the general who never left his bunker, who commanded from 70 miles away, who turned victory into defeat through the simple act of refusing to lead. Kasserine Pass taught America that courage flows downward from commanders who demonstrate it personally. Fredendall's cowardice had infected an entire corps, while Patton's bravery would soon inspire the same soldiers to excellence. The lesson was harsh but necessary. In war, there is no substitute for leaders who lead from the front.